Hello, girls and boys. Welcome. Welcome, teachers. This is our last field trip, our last virtual field trip for the summer. And I'm glad we made it this far. I'm glad you've all made it this far. We have a real treat for you today. Today, we're going to be going to Catalina Island, and that's going to be exciting. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our presenters, Miss Linda Chilton, and she's going to introduce us to our other presenter, who, from what I've understand, is going to take us underwater through video and through some pictures. So that's going to be really, really exciting. So Miss Linda Chilton, go ahead and take it away, and you can introduce Miss Lorraine Sadler. But take it away, Miss Linda.
Terrific. Good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with you today. And as Mr. Jimenez said, we are going to go out to Catalina Island. And we're going to look at how do different environments influence how easy or hard it is for an organism to survive. You learned about different traits or characteristics, adaptations for animals on land and animals that are mammals. Today we're going to be focusing on fish and on invertebrates. Lorraine lives out at Catalina, and while she can't take you underwater right now diving, she can take you there in our imagination with her photographs and videos that she captured just to share with all of you. Lorraine's a research diver, a dive instructor, and she also is an amazing educator. So let me turn this over to Lorraine. Go ahead, Lorraine. Thanks for coming.
Hello, everybody. How are all my young scientist friends today? I am really excited to be here with you, and I'll bet you didn't know that you were already scientists. If you've ever asked a question why, you are a scientist. You learn and you adapt, and you are also awesome creatures along with all of the other many awesome living creatures here on Earth. The Earth is filled with many different environments, and the animals are adapted to living in that environment. If they don't adapt, they die, just like the dinosaurs. We don't see dinosaurs around today, do we? So you have the ability, just like other animals, to adapt to changing conditions using your brain and other senses and organs in order to survive. These have developed over many, many thousands or millions of years for each animal to be able to survive in its environment. For example, if you go outside and it's way too hot, what do? Do you just stand there and suffer? No, you use your senses to tell you it's too hot, and then you go and inside maybe and change to cooler clothes, or you might drink water or something like that. So you adapt just like every other animal. Using your observation skills for doing that. And so we're going to look at a few environments today. And so what I want to do is take you on a dive, and let's see if we can share a dive together. We've already talked about us, and there I am at Catalina Island in the water, which I love to do. And we're going to explore the underwater world. Here we have an environment that is rocky, but the rocks are covered up by a lot of different animals. These animals are floating or swimming in the water. As you can see, those little tiny dots there, those are a fish called blacksmith. And blacksmith live in kind of schools. Now, there are large schools and there are small schools, but the blacksmith are maybe 2 to 3 inches in length right now. So they're babies, and they kind of hover close to the rocks because if a predator comes along, they can hide in the rocks or in the plants called algae that live on the bottom. We also see some orange fish called a Garibaldi, and we'll talk more about them later. And then hanging under the algae, you'll find little tiny fish called senoritas, and they will actually hide under the algae if a predator comes along. So all these animals are using different parts of the environment to help them survive. I'm going to take you on a little dive right now. And what I would like for you to do is to observe the animals and watch what they are doing in the marine environment. To our right, we see algae called giant bladder kelp, and many, many organisms use this to get in the water. So let's grab our mask and our snorkel. And Miss Linda is my buddy, and she will grab her fins as well as I will, and we'll go for a dive. All right, let's go.
And girls and boys, don't forget to use the Google Doc to ask your questions. So any questions you might have, use that Google document.
How many fish species can you see? Look at all the different colors. And there in the background, we see more kelp standing up. And here in the foreground, we see more kelp. And you can hear all the noise that some animals make underwater. So let's get to the surface. How was that?
Oh, that was cool.
Okay, so here is the underwater forest that we were talking about. It's a giant forest. This plant can grow up to 3 feet per day, and it doesn't need any soil. Of course, it doesn't need any water because it's in the water. And we have lots of organisms that use the whole forest, all the way from up at the top down to the very bottom. And the kelp habitat is critical for an animal called a kelp bass. And here we see a number of kelp bass hanging around the kelp. They are actually eating or trying to eat a critter that is floating around that was part of the plankton. So there we have that animal. This organism is the kelp, and the kelp is growing. And in the kelp bass will hide, especially when they're juveniles. When they're juveniles, they are hiding to become predators, but they don't want to get eaten before they become an adult. When they are adults, they hide in the kelp in order to ambush prey. So they use the kelp throughout their whole life. It's really kind of cool to see that. But what happens when the kelp goes away? So the kelp goes away, and the El Nino, which is a warm water condition, causes the kelp to die off. Here we see the kelp in the background, and it is not going all the way to the surface. The blades are gone or bleached out, and we don't see as many kelp bass, do we? So how does this animal learn to adapt? Well, they have done a pretty good job. And you can see that in the next photo as we go to the bottom. So the kelp bass is actually sitting on the bottom. So it's adapting to the conditions that we have found here. And it's using its pectoral fins to stabilize itself, to anchor itself, to stay in place. It's using its large eyes to look up to see any prey. And it's using its dorsal fin, that's erect right now, to stabilize it so that when it explodes off the bottom using its powerful tail fin, it can use it as a keel, which means like human beings that build a boat with a structure underneath that helps the boat to run straight. This dorsal fin can help the kelp bass to go straight and explode out of the bottom, and using its mouth to capture its prey.
So now the chance to be able to ask any of your questions, and I think Mr. Jimenez might have some of those questions if you entered them in the Google Doc. If you've noticed, structure or environment is really important from what Lorraine's telling us, that without that environment, animals have to adapt and use the structures on their body to help them in making those adaptations. We know that people are able to make similar structures, like Lorraine was mentioning the keel on a boat that people end up making. So anyone have any questions, Mr. Jimenez?
Yes, they do. Luna from Robert Hill Lane asks, is there only one type or color of kelp, or is there more?
Yes, Luna, that's a really great question. There are lots of different varieties of kelp. Some, like the giant bladder kelp, grow all the way to the surface. Some, like the kelp we see next to the kelp bass on the bottom, are very short and grow only a foot or two off the bottom. There are different colors of kelp too that grow in different depths of water as well. And if you'll look, you'll see that the color of the kelp actually helps the fish to blend in. So if you squint your eyes, you can see that that blotchy color pattern actually helps the kelp bass to disappear.
And it's kind of cool because you can see red algae, brown algae, or green algae are kind of the groupings we look at. And they don't always match the color name they fall under, do they, Lorraine?
No, they don't. Brown is kind of golden, isn't it? But that's another physiological adaptation for these plants to be able to live at different depths. So red kelp can grow deeper than brown. Brown can grow deeper than green. And green is in the shallow waters, maybe 20, 30 feet, the maximum, whereas red kelp can grow in over 150 feet of water.
Wow.
Thank you. Is there another question?
Yes, so there's many, there's several. So let me get to Sebastian over at Brooklyn, Stacy at HPES. Have you ever seen a shark, or have you ever been confronted by a shark while observing other fish? And what did you do?
Good questions. I have seen many different kinds of sharks. I've never been confronted by a shark. Most of the time, the sharks will actually try to get away from you. There are very few sharks that actually will try to be aggressive towards us. We are viewed as another thing to be curious about, and they'll come up and take a look at you, but most of the time, if you try to approach them, they will leave. They do not like to be pursued. And they're a lot faster than we are in the water.
They're also asking the types of fish. How many types of fish are there? How many years can a fish live? And then the yellowfish in particular, is it yellow when it's born?
Which fish? The yellowfish?
The one that was in the
Garibaldi?
video, I believe. Yeah.
Okay. Well, there are many, many different kinds of fish. There are thousands of different species of fish. Then they have lived in the ocean for many, many millions of years. And over those millions of years, they have adapted. So there are a number of different adaptations that these organisms can make. What was the
And the Garibaldi, Lorraine's going to be telling you more about that
right.
when we go along in the slideshow a little further. And it is, I mean, it's amazing to realize that there are close to 20,000 different species of fish we've identified so far. So there's still
Wow.
ones we've never identified yet.
And about how the age of fish are, fish can live anywhere from a few years, like 5, 10 years, to over 100 years. Some
Wow.
deep water species can live a very long time, and they're very slow growing. And that's the problem that we have with when we capture fish. We need to know about their biology, their history, to understand how many of them we can capture before we end up taking too many, and then the fish can't reproduce themselves.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and go on to the next segment. And girls and boys, keep the questions coming.
I'm sorry?
It's your
We
turn,
can-
Lorraine, to keep going.
Oh, yes. So we're going to look at another environment, and that other environment is the sand. And out on this environment is an animal called a halibut. Can everybody see the halibut? Looks like the sand, doesn't he? And he's kind of flat as well. So this is really interesting because the animals actually have adapted to living on the sand. And we are going to take another look at a closer halibut. And in this shot, we can actually see that he has actually got sand on top of him. How did that happen? He uses his flat body to undulate or flap his body up and down, which raises a cloud of sand, and then the sand falls down on top of his body, and that allows her to be even more camouflaged. You can also see that the fin is different. It's long, and it actually goes all the way to near the tail of the animal. So another adaptation. And then look at the eyes. Can you see the eyes? The eyes are all on one side. So instead of being vertical and having an eye on either side, this animal is flat and has eyes on both sides. But it doesn't start out that way. When it's a baby living in the plankton, the animal actually has an eye on either side. And at a certain time, a gene which controls behavior turns on, ding, and one eye crawls over to the other side. The animal turns over on its side, flattens out, and swims on to the bottom and stays there. You'll also notice that he's got very big teeth. So she can use her tail and muscles to explode out of the bottom and grab prey with her teeth. So a very efficient predator, and that is the halibut. And since you see that this animal is on the sand, they can hide to a certain extent, but what happens when another sand animal can't get onto the sand? This is a shovel-nosed guitarfish, and even though you see she is trying to hide, her body is very visible as she is not on the sand, but she is in the rocky cobbles along with a little bit of algae or kelp.
It's kind of amazing, Lorraine, that you're sharing about these animals and they are able to bury under the sand and still breathe and pull in oxygen through the water, through their gills. And you're right, they really stand out when you don't have that ability to bury. Did anyone have any questions about these sandy bottom animals or any of the other things Lorraine shared?
Yes, I'm sorry, I was muted. They're asking what's inside of the fish.
What's inside? Well, just like you and I have organs for digesting food or a heart, these animals have the same kinds of organs. In the case of the shovel-nosed guitarfish, his mouth is actually on the bottom, which is very good because he eats food that is buried in the sand on the bottom. And just like a shark, because these guys are related to sharks, this animal actually uses electrical sensors to find animals in the bottom, and then she can dig them up and eat them.
They're asking also, does that fish ever swim around in the ocean?
Yes, when she's disturbed, she can swim around, or if she figures she's been discovered, she will quickly explode out of the bottom and swim away. And you can see that she has a very large body with a lot of tail. So this animal is very fast at getting away from other predators.
And isn't it true, Lorraine, that some of those predators are other sharks? One of the biggest predators on rays and skates and small sharks is other sharks?
Is other sharks, that's correct.
Yeah.
So bigger sharks will eat littler sharks, and bigger fish will eat littler fish. And some species will eat their same juveniles or babies.
Wow. They're asking also, why does that animal, not this one, like the one before, why does it look like sand?
Why does it look like sand? Because the sand helps the animal to camouflage itself. This means that the animal can look like its bottom environment. We call that biomimicry. So it's very similar to bioengineering in that they can actually change their spots or their pattern on their back in order to hide more efficiently.
And the rain is
Excellent.
one of those adaptations to live at different places in the ocean, so you're not all competing for the same food. So the halibut living at the bottom and swimming up means it's being able to grab food from another environment from where it's living instead of feeding down in the mud or in the sand like the shovel nose.
That's correct, yes. So the halibut will actually feed on animals in the water column. We saw that with the kelp bass, but the kelp bass can feed on animals that are even higher up in the water column. So they're essentially not competing with each other, but using different parts of the environment to satisfy their needs.
And why is it called a shovel-nosed guitarfish?
Good question. The shovel-nosed guitarfish, if you can look at the front of the animal, has a kind of pointy snout and a wide face or head. That gives it the kind of a shape of a shovel. So it's it's part of the nose. So then it is like a shovel that you would dig into the dirt with.
And then there's one class that's really excited about seeing a school of fish, and they're wondering, are they going to get to see a school of fish?
Well, we saw a school of fish in the video, and maybe if there's time afterwards, we can run the video again and they can see another school of fish. But let's take a
perfect,
look
Ms.
at
Brink.
another environment if we have time. Are we ready to
Yes.
go on? All
Yes.
right. All right. So here we have a environment that is the small kelp or algae. And in it, we see a brightly colored fish called a Garibaldi. Now, this is a juvenile Garibaldi, and Garibaldis change color from the time they're juveniles to when they become an adult. This is another adaptation that allows the juveniles to maybe hide from bigger predators, because this little fish is only about the size of a quarter. So it's a tasty morsel for some kind of predator out there. If you squint at it, then you can kind of get an idea of what a fish might see, and the outline of the fish just starts to disappear. As they get larger, they start losing their spots, but the animal itself is starting to get the coloration of the adult form. They lose those spots, but they gain a personality that is very aggressive. And this is the male Garibaldi, and they are our state marine fish. So Garibaldi are our saltwater marine fish or saltwater state fish. So when the male is in breeding season, we can tell it's a male because they have a territory, they get very aggressive, they chase other fish away, and this fish is only about as big as your forearm, about 8 inches or so. So it makes up for its lack of size by being aggressive. The reason it's aggressive is because the male wants to protect the eggs that the female has laid in his nest. And he will chase other animals away. He'll make he'll swim very quickly towards you, like he wants to chase you away. He will make popping noises, and then they can actually bite. They can't do a huge amount of damage, but you get the point that they don't want you in their territory. And then the male will guard the nest until the eggs hatch, and then the female and the male just do their thing and work around that way.
What's the temperature of the water like, Miss Lorraine, in this environment that you're
The
showing
water right now is around 65 degrees. So although
Ooh.
you can dive in it, you probably want a protection called an exposure suit or a wetsuit in order to not be cold, because after a few minutes you will start to get very cold in the water. Any other questions? I'm sure there are going to be all kinds of questions. You're good scientists to ask a lot of questions. Well, here's a really cool adaptation. And this animal, I think, is the ultimate adapter and uses bioengineering or biomimicry to the extreme. Can everybody see the octopus? This octopus is hiding in its burrow, and she is kind of looking for prey maybe, but she is very happy to be there. And you can see that her skin is different color. And you can also see there are little projections or bumps on her skin. But when she goes in search of prey, she has to come out of her burrow and she will change color. Did everybody see that? She changed her color. She's got some big bumps. She's lighter in color and she's trying to mimic the background. If she gets out onto the sand or cobbles, she has changed again. Now she's smooth, so she's lost all the bumps and she's kind of gotten a more mottled skin to match the cobbles and the pebbles on the bottom. Isn't that cool? Pretty neat animal, huh? And then she can match several different environments at once by looking at the sand. So she's got eyes that are almost as good as yours and mine. So they can see very, very well. She can actually mimic the sand here, and then she can mimic the cobbles here, and she's getting little bumps on her skin so that she can mimic the kelp over on this side. And everybody can see that, I hope. And then she finds her prey, and the ultimate adaptation is to grab her with not one arm, but 8 arms. And here's one arm that she is bringing out, and on the arm itself are more adaptations, and these are suckers. So she has 8 arms to be able to grab the animal with all those suckers and take it back to her burrow where she can enjoy her meal. Pretty cool, huh? This spiky skin and the darker and the lighter so she can change colors. So I give her the award for being the ultimate adapter.
Are there any more questions, Mr. Jimenez?
Yes, there are. The students want to know, Pablo from Brooklyn wants to know what's in the very bottom of the ocean.
Pablo, that's a great question. What's in the very, very bottom of the ocean is a variety of different environments, but it's mostly sand and mud, and unfortunately some things that have filtered down from the surface environment or the beaches, like plastic cups and bottles and pieces and things like that. Dead things filter down to the bottom too, because it's a very, very huge environment. So the ocean takes up 3/4 of the planet. And this huge ocean is a big area for a lot of organisms, and most of those we haven't explored yet. Wouldn't it be cool if one of you or some of you actually get to the bottom of the ocean and get to explore it? What a great thing that would be, huh?
Yeah, and other areas that aren't quite as deep, Pablo, in case you're wondering, have things like deep sea vents with worms and clams that they first discovered about 40 years ago, which might seem like a long time to you, but to others of us, that wasn't that long ago, to discover these deep water animals and how they're living. And they don't use light.
Yeah, and you'll notice that the octopus doesn't have a shell and it doesn't have fins. It used to have a shell, but has lost its shell and adapted to losing the shell. We don't really know why, but scientists are working on trying to figure out why. We have some theories, but we don't exactly know why yet. But this animal has actually been able to learn, remember, and be able to make that adaptation to allow them to catch prey if they need to find it in a different way than they normally find their prey. So they are very, very smart, and I think they're the smartest invertebrate in the world. very cool animals.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions regarding the octopus. Is how does it change its skin? Does it really spray out ink? And does it have a beak to eat with? And how hard is the bite of an octopus?
The beak looks kind of like a parrot. So yes, it does have a beak and it can bite through prey, and that will allow it to secrete a little poison that will relax the animal and make it easier for the octopus to eat. It can use its skin with different kinds of muscles. So we can go out in the cold and our skin goes up, and if anybody's ever had goosebumps, you know, our skin can bump up. We can't control that, but the octopus can make its skin bumpy with the muscles under the skin. It can also make the skin different colored by using muscles to close off parts of the skin or open it up so you see the different colors. Really cool adaptations.
And Lorraine, I'm guessing you've never been bitten by an octopus, which is good. I know I have once when I saw some people in the tide pools passing one around, and it was so stressed. I said, why don't you let me put it back? And they handed it to me and it bit my hand. And
Oh,
it was a really powerful pinch, but it let go right away. And I put it back in the water and it's just moved off. But animals are real fragile, and that can also be a defense, but they can even bite through a crab shell. So depending on the size of the octopus, that could be pretty painful.
Yes, you bring up a good point, Linda. People playing with animals like that is irresponsible. Animals should be respected and observed. If you want to touch them, that's fine, but picking them up and throwing them around, that is really sad. We need to get education so that people can take care of the animals, because we are an animal too, and animals need to be taken care of, and all animals need to be taken care of them in their environment. That really distresses me that people still don't have enough respect for the animals to watch it and wonder and see how neat it is and then go find out more about the animal. All right, so actually, we really don't know what's in our future, but the more we can learn and know, the better we can make intelligent decisions on how to adapt to the changing conditions. Also, if you know me for long enough, or if you get my emails, I think that everything is connected. We just don't know how yet. So what connection will you make? What connection will you find? I hope you have enjoyed our little talk, and all the little scientists out there go out and say why. Find things.
Thanks, Lorraine. And you know what, Lorraine? I know you've been diving out at Farnsworth Bank, and I found a video from one of our friends, Maurice, that he took of schooling fish, and someone was curious about that. Would it be okay if I shared it on my screen and then everyone can watch that too? And you can maybe tell about the fish and what they're doing?
That's perfect. Yes.
Okay.
Farnsworth Bank is a pinnacle, so it's a mountain underwater, but it does not come all the way to the surface of the water. So we dive down about 50 to 60 feet to the top of the pinnacle, and then we can watch these animals. So let's take a look.
Okay, I'm going to need you to probably stop sharing your screen.
Okay. And
here we go. Okay.
oh,
And everyone can see those, and let's watch as they move.
This is a big school of jack mackerel and some others mixed in. And jack mackerel and other fish school in these huge numbers, whereas the little blacksmith we saw live in a very spread out school. But these guys swim in a school of huge numbers, And sometimes that's how humans capture them, is by finding these big schools and then putting a big net around so that we can capture them and eat them. But the big school is a protection, because a predator might be confused about which fish is he going to get. And then as he darts into the school to try to capture one of them, they all spread out in all different directions. So it makes it very hard to capture one animal for food.
Thanks, Lorraine. And I can stop sharing. Were there other questions, Mr. Jimenez?
I think we got to pretty much all the questions that the kids asked. I mean, there were some really great questions. Oh,
Awesome.
there's a couple of fun ones. Can we finish off with a couple of fun ones?
Sure.
So one is, do fish drink water?
That's a very good question. Fish will take water in when they are capturing prey, but they don't really drink water. They actually get enough from the prey that they eat. They have various adaptations in their body, an organ called a kidney, that can help them regulate how much water they get or need.
Excellent. And then maybe each of you can chime in with an answer. Spiro from Rowan Elementary says, some of these fish have funny names. What is the funniest name for a fish that you've heard of?
Oh, it's a good question. I'll have to think about that for a second. Linda?
Yeah, there's two that I can think of. I know you asked for one, but the two I can think of, one is a sarcastic fringe head.
Mm-hmm.
And it's called sarcastic fringe head because it has structures above its eyes that look like fringes, or like really super long eyelashes. And when any other fish comes near its burrow, it opens its mouth almost wider than its body is long. And so that's why I think it got the name sarcastic fringe head. And the other one is a triple wart sea devil. And it's found in the deep water, and it's a really cool angler fish that has a lure that it uses to attract food. And it can have, the female is large, the male is very small, and he attaches to the female, and there can be many males attached. I'm guessing maybe initially someone saw it with 3 males, and that's why they called it a triple. But I don't know. So now I'm curious. I wonder how that happened, and I'm going to have to go figure that out.
Yeah. I have also heard of toothfishes, which is a very deep water species. And those animals have very large teeth. You can also find scorpion fish. Now, scorpion fish has fins that are poisonous. And so those fins can allow that animal to be protected. So this is a defensive weapon. So we see very few animals that have offensive weapons other than to find prey, but defensive weapons in order to protect themselves so they can go about their business in finding their own food.
Well, I want to thank you both for taking us on this field trip out to Catalina Island under the ocean to see all these different adaptations that animals have developed to be able to survive and to be able to thrive. So thank you, Miss Linda, thank you, Miss Lorraine, girls and boys. Thank you very much for joining us. I hope you enjoy the rest of your summer school. We're almost done. I know my daughter here. She enjoyed the field trip as well.
Hi.
We're out here. We're out here in Carpinteria. Actually, we came just for the weekend, and I have my own encounter with a stingray yesterday. It just I must have stepped wrong, and it stung me, and so that was
one of the best things to do if you haven't learned it before is the stingray shuffle. And we have more and more stingrays this year than I've heard in a long time. So as you go into the water, kind of drag your feet in the sand. And as you kick up the sand, it warns the stingray something bigger is coming, and then it'll swim away. It only stings you by mistake.
Yeah, they do not like to be stepped on, as you can imagine. I would not like to be stepped on. So,
Oh, I hope you're okay. That's painful.
yeah. How did they treat it?
Hot water.
Very
Yes.
good.
So
Yep.
hot water to neutralize the poison, and then it was just Tylenol for the pain. And today it's just sore and swollen. So that shuffle, I'm going to be using that shuffle
Right.
today.
And if you use some more hot water, that might help because it's protein based. And
Right.
so heat, just like any other protein you would cook to eat, it's going to help break down that protein. And maybe that will help with the pain. Sorry about that, but have fun out there. It's a great place.
And then you can use ice as well to help reduce the swelling. So no more than 20 minutes at a time that you can use the ice, but periodically through the day, go ahead and use that because that'll help as well. And that'll help promote blood flow, which is another adaptation for us to be able to get well faster.
Bye, friends.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.